order. Welcome to meeting number 11, the Standing Committee on Natural Resources on the forest industry. Today we have two witnesses. We're scheduled for the first hour and a half, and then at 2:30 we are going to suspend and go on camera to discuss some committee business, including the balance of this report. Before we get into the introduction to the witnesses, which I will do in a second, I want to just chat briefly about something that happened at the end of the last meeting. We ran out of time when we were going into committee business. I understand that Mr. McLean was wanting to present something at the time, which didn't happen. I subsequently spoke to Mr. McLean. To the extent there was any confusion on Monday about process and how that happened, I will take responsibility and I apologize. I understand Mr. McLean is going to be the first person asking questions to do today, but to avoid cutting in his time to do that, I would like to offer him the floor right now for a few minutes to allow him to do what he was trying to do on Monday. So Mr. McLean, again, my apologies for the confusion on Monday. It was a misunderstanding on my part, and so I'm yielding the floor to you to try to allow you to do what you were going to do on Monday.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I presume we're part of the public meeting at this point in time?
We are, yes.
Good. Well, I'll just read the motion into the record here that we put on the paper here and distributed to all the committee members prior to. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study of the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, including A, the loss of jobs and investment across Canada in all sectors that supply the energy sector, B, the impact the cancellation of this product will have on the economic recovery from COVID-19 of Canada's energy sector and natural resource industry, that the committee invite relevant witnesses, including representatives of industry and workers affected, as well as the Minister of Natural Resources, that the Minister appear for not less than 2 hours, that these meetings be televised, that 6 meetings be allocated for this study, and that following this study, a report with recommendations be presented to the House of Commons. So that's the motion, but let me speak to the motion here, if I may, Mr. Chair. We've been through a lot in the energy industry over the last 5 years, and that includes the cancellation of several projects which were years in the mix. And as you know, Mr. Chair, I've only been a member of Parliament for a year and a half. So in that year and a half, getting towards common sense about how we approach what's happening in this industry and what's happening in the world has been what I think we need to bring to the table here. The recent cancellation of Keystone XL is one in a long list of failures that have happened on our side of the border vis-a-vis constructing infrastructure to get our product to market with our most important trading partner. And that partner, of course, is the United States of America. I know that the United States is the party that actually canceled this, but it did seem very much like a shrug of the shoulders to this government that one more failed infrastructure investment didn't occur to actually get us our resource to market. And that market that we're getting to, of course, is the Gulf Coast. That Gulf Coast is essential for the heavy oil that's produced in Alberta to find a home where it gets the proper pricing. Infrastructure is what's constraining us from getting a world price for our resource at this point in time. That lack of infrastructure translates to a $16 billion a year wealth transfer from Canada to the United States. And that is something that we should all be standing against at this point in time, because it matters to this economy, it matters to Canadian taxpayers, it matters to our future. And every one of the social services that we as government elected representatives are trying to provide to our constituents. And that's not happening right now. And there is no real path forward. Every path forward we seem to take over the past 5 years has been stymied. And sometimes I agree it's stymied by a foreign government that we don't seem to be paying enough attention to as far as how to get them through the process. And sometimes it's stymied by our own government. And I'll go back, we can look in reverse here over the last year about Keystone XL, which seemed to tick all the boxes, just like Tech Frontier. These are all projects that are worth thousands of jobs to Canadians, thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in tax revenue, environmental advancements in the way we produce our energy in this country, Indigenous participation in the economy in Canada. All of these things have to move forward together. And every time one of these proponents brings one of these projects to the table and ticks all those boxes and looks like it's getting through the process, there's an interruption at one set at any point in time where suddenly it does not proceed. And this has to change. It's outlook that has to change more than anything else. And I humbly submit, Mr. Chair, after being in this job for a year and a half, there does not seem to be an open mind in many of the members on the other side of the aisle. And I appreciate that there are some that are still entertaining why we actually do need to move forward with our resource development in Canada. This is the Natural Resources Committee. We need to look at how we actually produce resources in this country and how we actually take advantage of what we have in this country and contribute to the world's goals going forward. Part of those goals are energy goals, and part of those goals are environmental goals. And if you take a look at how much our industry has progressed as far as meeting its environmental commitments, it's astounding vis-a-vis every other industry in Canada, vis-a-vis every other hydrocarbon industry in the world. We lead on so many of these measures. Now, I know we were in debate in the House of Commons yesterday, and the Parliamentary Secretary had an excellent speech on Line 5, which does appear to be, again, in the mix as far as a cancellation. That cancellation is going to be disastrous, not just for the oil flow, and that's just not Canadian oil. There's also some US oil that finds its way into that pipe, but it is a big conduit of important oil getting towards refining and manufacturing and back, because we get that raw resource to the markets where we manufacture it, we refine it into finished products, and we actually turn it into things like automobile products. So we're building with the plastics that come out of the finished product at the end of the day. It is a linchpin for our economy. To lose that because a state governor is saying they don't like the environmental effects of a pipeline under the lake. It's been an easement there for over 60 years, has never had an accident, and yet we're going to have to put the oil on tankers, of all things, as if that eases any of the environmental concerns the lakes are going to face. And yet we can't seem to kind of get absolute clarity that even the government's paying attention to enforcing or pushing the US government on enforcing the Transit Pipelines Treaty from 1977. There is a lack of attention here being paid by the government towards this very important file about getting our resources to market. We need to address that. We need to turn the government's attention towards what is, number one, the biggest wealth generator in this country.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
All of the bills for how many of our social services for Lord knows how long. Mr. Chair, you can recognize a point of order, or do I still have the floor?
I was wondering if you were finished. I was going to let you go, but if you're not, then I'll acknowledge the point of order.
Not finished.
Okay, Mr. Sidhu, you had a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do know, and I'm respectful to the matter, but I also know that the witnesses have taken time to be here, and many of us want to hear from the witnesses. It's very important that we hear their testimony. So, I understand the sincerity and the sensitivity of the matter, but I also want to respect our witnesses here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sidhu. But this is the first. This is the first week we've been back in Parliament since Keystone XL was canceled, and this is an important issue for the country, whether you like it or not. So the witnesses can wait while we go through this matter, with all due respect. So please, let's continue. Now, I heard the Parliamentary Secretary in the House of Commons yesterday talk about this matter, Line 5 being one, and he actually said the opposition raised this irresponsibly, that this is something that we shouldn't deal with as an opposition in the House of Commons. We raised this 6 times before the government even acknowledged that Line 5 was an issue that they had to deal with. So this is the job of opposition, to hold a government to account on the issues that affect our country, the issues that affect our constituents. And yet, again, I see from the Parliamentary Secretary's words that he doesn't think we should be involved in it. Well, I strongly differ with the Parliamentary Secretary in that respect. And matter of fact, I was watching the news last night, and I watched Richard Madden on CTV News. Richard Madden was in the White House asking the same question. And the concerns were raised from the response in the White House that, yes, this is something they're looking at. We need to get our team down there and actually making sure that the case is made why this is a long-standing, important infrastructure piece across this country that needs to be maintained no matter what. This is something that does not seem to be at the forefront of this government's agenda and is not irresponsibility for the opposition to raise it. And if it's irresponsible for us to raise it, well, God forbid what happens when Richard Madden and CTV News raises it in the White House. So good thing we're on top of it here on one side of Parliament. We'd like to make sure the government side of Parliament actually gets on top of this issue as well, because right now, as with all these issues, it seems to be ignoring it as if these issues don't matter or will just go away. This isn't going away. This is our most important trade. We make $100 billion a year in our balance of trade with our oil export alone. Significant value added. For a country that runs a $30 billion plus deficit in the balance of trade, $100 billion is a wallop, and it's the biggest wallop in our budget. And you take a look at our actual revenue we've derived almost $600 billion in government revenue in Canada over the last 20 years. Real cash at the end of the day. Think about where our deficits are now. Think about how we're going to come out of this pandemic, and think about how we're actually going to address greenhouse gas reduction without this industry, because without this industry, we're capped. This industry reduces more than any other industry out there. So my friends on this committee, I want you to take a good look at this and try and move it forward in the government's mandate here, so we're actually paying attention to this where it really, really matters. And think about that, and think about the failures that have happened over the last 5 years. Think about Keystone XL if you want to go back a week. Think about Tech Frontier. Think about Northwest Gateway. Think about Energy East. Think about TMX and why the government had to step in to buy it, because we as a country screwed up a regulatory regime that got a private company to build a pipeline to get our product to market. That is all failure. Let's look at line 5. Let's look at line 3 that's on the table now, and let's get a plan together so we stop failing at this. The government needs to start caring that they're failing at every file in the energy sector. And they need to start caring about the jobs that we're losing. They need to start caring about the economic outcome, and they need to start caring about how we come out of this pandemic at the end of the day. I've said a lot here, Mr. Chair. Motion's on the table, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McLean, and thank you for tabling your motion and for making your comments. There's a number of hands up. I have the sequence that they were raised as Mr. Sadhu, Ms. Harder, Mr. Patzer, Mr. May, Mr. Zimmer, Mr. Simard, and Mr. Canning. So next up is Mr. Sadhu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague. I think just to be respectful to everyone, I think we should just vote on this matter. See what the will of the committee is.
You're calling the question, Mr. Sadhu?
I am.
Okay, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, I believe we need to vote on the...
Point of order.
1 second, Ms. Harder. The clerk was trying to say something.
Would you now like me to proceed with the vote, Mr. Chair?
If the point of order, I'll hear from Ms. Harder's point of order first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, when there are existing hands that have been raised, I believe that it is due course to hear from those that have their hands up rather than allowing the member to call a vote. If you look in the Green Book, you'll find procedure for this.
My understanding is when the question's been called, we have to vote, but that's why I turned to the clerk.
Then I would ask the clerk to confer with you on this matter.
Madam Clerk. I'm looking at the wrong screen, that's fine.
If it's the
Thank you for your patience. We just checked procedure, and we can proceed with hearing from other members to continue the debate. Thank you.
Even when a member calls the vote, Madam Clerk?
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président, il n'y a plus de traduction en français.
Sorry.
Apologies.
Not working on
I will
my
get
end
back
either.
to you shortly. I will verify that answer and get back to everyone shortly.
Il n'y a pas de souci. On a eu un petit délai dans l'interprétation, mais c'est reparti.
Well, there was a little.
Okay, so there was a short delay in the interpretation, but it's now working. No problem.
On your end now.
Oui, c'est bon.
Yes, it's back now. It's fine, thank you. Merci.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, just to clarify then, Mr. Sidhu called the question. Does that mean I understood that meant we needed to vote right away before we carried on?
I would like to request that we suspend momentarily so I can verify some information with the chair. If that's all right. I want to make sure I'm
Thank
giving
you.
everybody the
Mr.
correct information. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Madam Clerk, I think we're not really saving any time, so I'd rather just kind of hear what our colleagues have to say in the meantime instead of suspending. It'd be better use of our time.
Okay. So you've taken the issue off the table, so that's fine. Okay, so shall I move to Ms. Harder then, Mr. Sidhu? You're next, Rachel.
Yes, of course, and I'd like to hear
Okay.
from our block and NDP colleagues as well.
Okay, Ms. Harder, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, according to the Green Book, when we're in the middle of debating a motion, all members with their hands raised or who wish to speak to the debate must be heard before the vote can be called. It is not a thing for one member to interject and insist that the voices of others be squelched. I will continue, thank you. In the G7 here in Canada, we face the lowest vaccination rate, the biggest deficit, and one of the highest jobless rates in the G7. That's an atrocious record. You add to that then, within that jobless rate, we see that the Keystone XL project has been kiboshed. And what's interesting to me is that the Prime Minister of this country, Mr. Trudeau, had an opportunity to pick up the phone and to make a call. He had an opportunity to advocate for Canadians, to make sure that their livelihoods were protected, and furthermore, to insist on the unity of this country, which of course is largely due to the sharing of resources from coast to coast. Energy is the fuel of life. Without it, we cease to be able to function in the current capacities that we do. It might be nice to think about a world that is entirely green, but it is not reasonable or realistic right now. And so we must function within the realm of what's possible. We must function within the realm of reality. And that is to say that we must continue to develop this resource called oil and gas. And in order to do that, we need a prime minister who is going to contend for its development, because Canadians deserve that. And when it comes to Keystone XL, we note that the prime minister did not even do so much as pick up the phone and make a call in order to advocate for this project. Further to that, when he had the opportunity during a scheduled phone call, he did not raise this issue. That's horrendous. That is absolutely horrendous. It is a slap in the face to those in the energy sector and to Canadians as a whole who value the unity of this country and who value their day in and day out lifestyle and the things that we get to do. You know, what's interesting to me is that the Prime Minister had no problem applying some pressure to the former Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, in order to try to persuade her or urge her or even force her to let SNC-Lavalin off the hook when they were under criminal investigation. He did this in the name of jobs. He said he was protecting jobs.
Mr. Chair, point of order, please.
No problem.
Mr. May,
doing
yeah.
Point of order. Can I ask
And
what the
yet, when it
relevance
comes
is
to
of some of this?
Keystone
Ms. Harder, can you
XL,
just
we're debating a
stop for
motion
one
that's on
moment,
the
please?
floor right now. Can we have witnesses waiting for us? I get that the member wants her clippable moment here and drag out the laundry list of complaints she has, but we have witnesses in front of us, and I'd ask her please to stay relevant to that motion.
Thanks, Mr. May. Yeah, Ms. Harder, if you could just speak to the motion itself, that would make things run a little smoother.
Mr. Maloney, Chair, I am talking about Keystone XL and jobs, which has everything to do with the motion.
Well, you are now. You had deviated from that a bit, but carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also point out that we did attempt to bring this motion forward at the last committee, and we attempted to do so in a respectful way that honored the time of our witnesses at that point in time. Unfortunately, a decision was made that we were not allowed to speak to this motion. And so now, in the essence of time, and of course, according to our mandate as members of parliament and as members of the official opposition, we've been left with no other choice than to take advantage of this opportunity that we have here today. And so I do extend an apology to the witnesses. I certainly wish that this wasn't the case. And hopefully, if we don't have sufficient time today, Mr. Chair, you would agree to bring them back. That said, I will continue with my statement.
So point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McLean, yes.
Just quickly here, I understand that the broadcast isn't picking up Ms. Harder, it's picking up the committee room instead. So in the efforts of full transparency here, can we make sure that the broadcast picks up the speaker?
I can hear her fine. I'm not sure what.
I think we can hear her. We can't see her. Is that?
I can see her too.
Yeah, I understand the broadcast doesn't. Apparently it's fixed. Okay, thank you.
I can see her and hear on my end.
Okay. Ms. Harder, can I just respond to something you said? Should I interpret what you're saying as that we're not going to get to the witnesses today? Is that the intention?
Maloney, I'm going to finish my statement. And of course, it's up to those who also have their hand up today as to how long this is going to take.
I was just trying to be courteous. Carry on.
Thank you. As I was stating, with regards to the Keystone XL pipeline, the Prime Minister had a responsibility, an opportunity to take leadership and to advocate for this project, not only for the sake of jobs, but for the sake of the unity of this country and, of course, our lives and the things that we enjoy doing day in and day out. With Keystone XL, then, in losing it, we are losing thousands of jobs. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the Prime Minister doing to fight for those jobs in the same way that he fought for SNC-Lavalin jobs in Quebec? What is he doing to advocate for the unity of this country? What is he doing to fight for the future of this nation? And I would say that he's doing an inadequate job. And so there's an opportunity here then to hear from witnesses and to either verify what I'm stating or perhaps to prove the Prime Minister innocent. And maybe he is doing a lot and it's just unbeknownst to us. And so when it comes to this, I think we have an opportunity here as a committee to take on a very important study that, again, contends for the state of unity in this nation and fights for the livelihood of many Canadians. I think this industry is absolutely vital. It is the greatest contributor to our nation's GDP. And so why wouldn't we want to have this conversation here at Natural Resources Committee? I do believe oil and gas is a natural resource. I do believe that Keystone XL is a significant, plays a significant role in its development. And so it seems consistent then with the mandate of this committee that we would take on this study. Now, I think when we look at this, we need to consider the impact of its cancellation. But further to that, we also need to figure out what went wrong. Why wasn't the Prime Minister willing to advocate for Canadians on this? Why wasn't he willing to pick up the phone and to make a call and to fight for our country? Because at the end of the day, right now, I would remind the committee and all Canadians that Canada is sitting in a place where we are facing the lowest vaccination rate, the biggest deficit, and among the highest jobless rate in the G7. The
Point
least
d'ordre,
our
Monsieur
Prime
le
Minister
Président.
can
Point
do
d'ordre.
is fight for
Point
jobs.
d'ordre, monsieur.
Ms. Harder.
S'il vous plaît.
Sure.
S'il vous plaît. Est-ce qu'on
Could we just stick to the motion on the debate? As Mrs. Harder said, the issue of vaccination is important, but maybe given that we have witnesses, we should stick to the motion being debated. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Simard. And Ms. Harder, I'll remind you again to try to stick to the motion.
Sure. Chair, one of the reasons why it's so important that we discuss vaccination rate, and you'll note that I gave it an honorable mention, but now I'll take time to go into it a little bit, is because it's directly related to jobs, which is to do with this motion.
It's not related to this motion. So if you can get back to the context that we're discussing here, that would save time and show the courtesy to the witnesses that you referred to earlier.
Mr. Maloney, this motion has to do with the loss of jobs and the loss of investment across Canada. A part of getting people back to work is making sure that they have access to vaccination should they choose to take one. That is all I wish to say. Taking me to task on this is what's wasting time.
Well, your colleagues are raising points of order, so
yes,
I just have to respond to them. So carry on, Ms. Harder.
Thank you. At the end of the day, look, as I've stated, this committee exists in order to look at the natural resources that exist within Canada and their development. This committee exists to then study the factors that would either facilitate or hinder the development of these resources and why those factors exist. And so this motion that is on the table right now in front of this committee is absolutely pertinent, and I would say even vital to the health and well-being of Canadians as a whole, and to our future prosperity as a nation. I'll complete my comments with that.
Thank you. Mr. Patzer, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think one of the other reasons why this motion is extremely relevant is in order for there to be any investment in green technology or the next phase of renewables is that we're going to have a robust energy sector that utilizes fossil fuels, that uses oil and gas. And that's what Keystone XL is going to provide the certainty for that. I spent time working on a wind farm myself, and my job was it was heavily based on the use and utilization of oil, which was obviously derived from fossil fuels. And so green technology does not exist without energy sector as it currently consists of oil and gas companies doing the work that they do and getting the resources to market in a way that they do. So any transition that is going to happen involving green technology has to involve oil and gas. Keystone XL pipeline was essential for that. The jobs that it creates in all sectors is extremely vital. And I think that's why this motion is extremely relevant and extremely important. And I hope that everybody will consider voting in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Patzer. Mr. May, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we adjourn the debate. I think we have witnesses in front of us. We're hearing a lot of repetition, and I think we should adjourn the debate and deal with this at another time when we do not have witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a dilatory motion, one which does require a vote right now. So, Madam Clerk, can you call the vote, please, on Mr. May's motion?
Okay. Ms. Jones.
Point of order.
So just clarity, we are actually voting on the adjourning the debate, not the motion.
Correct.
No,
Ms. Jones?
Point of order. Point of order.
We're voting, Ms. Harder.
You can't point of order a dilatory motion
No,
in your green book.
You actually can't call this.
We can,
Just did.
and it's been
Can and
done.
I did.
It's been done. Madam
I'm
Clerk,
sorry,
if you
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yes.
Thank you. So Mr. May is taking off his speaker and interjecting and directly being argumentative with me. That is inappropriate. Anything he states needs to go through you as the chair.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, but
Okay,
I had the
okay,
floor.
hold
I
on,
called
hold
a
on.
dilatory
Mis-
motion. The procedure is to move to a vote. Thank you.
Ms. Harder, Mr. May was well within his rights to move to adjourn debate, which he did do.
Point of order.
No, we are voting now, Ms. Harder.
Point of order.
Madam Clerk, can you please
Point of
carry
order.
on with the vote?
I will challenge your decision to
Ms.
ignore my point
Jones?
of order.
Is your point of order any different than the one you just made?
Point of
Thank
order.
you.
Carry
Point
on
of
with
order,
the vote,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
please.
Lefebvre?
Point of order.
Je vote pour ajourner le débat.
Extremely,
To adjourn the debate.
extremely inappropriate.
Mr. May?
You're silencing voices of members of this committee. It's wrong.
I've heard your point of order, Ms. Harder.
You
It's been ruled
haven't.
on.
You have not heard my point of order because you're
Mr.
refusing
May?
to do so.
In favor of adjourning the debate.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Respect, Mr. Chair, point of order.
I'm in favor of adjourning the debate.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can we get a ruling on this? Can you seek advice on this dilatory motion from your advisor close by, please?
The clerk is the person who knows the procedure, and the clerk called the vote because she knows that this is a dilatory motion, and once somebody moves to adjourn debate, it requires that we vote on it right away. Isn't that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Okay, so carry on with the vote, please.
Mr. May?
Yes, I thought I had already voted, but yes, I vote to adjourn the debate.
Well, I'm just letting you, and my apologies if I can interject here one moment, please, Mr. Chair. A dilatory motion is, it looks like you have to come up to a point where it's being adjourned to a point in time. You just can't adjourn it forever, which is effectively dismissing.
It's being adjourned. It's being adjourned today, Mr. McLean. That's
So it had,
what
so
the
the
motion
dilatory
calls for.
motion would be to adjourn it to a point. So are we adjourning this debate until 2 o'clock today would be the question? Are we adjourning it to our next meeting of this meeting? Or are we?
It's adjourned beyond this. It's adjourned beyond this meeting.
So, well, the
The
dilatory motion
process
will
we
have
can
to.
discuss after. We're now
The
losing
dilatory
time here.
motion would, if it's a dilatory motion, it's going to have to say it's adjourned to a point in time. What is that point in
Mr. Chair,
time?
we have a vote on the floor here. We have
I
a vote.
agree.
Some
Can we
of us
carry
have
on with the
already
vote, please,
voted.
Madam
We
Clerk?
need to
Can I
carry
ask
on
the
with the
clerk, because
vote.
the clerk clearly, let's check with the clerk, because if a dilatory motion needs a time it's adjourning to, then it's not a dilatory motion just to kind of erase debate, which is Mr. May's intent here, frankly.
Point of order,
frankly,
Mr.
should be
Chair, but my intention is to get to the witnesses that we have scheduled today.
intentions or not, this is a
Madam-
motion on the floor,
Okay,
and there's actually debate.
Mr. McLean, there is a
motion.
motion on the floor which we're voting on, and I don't like interrupting anybody any more than anybody else likes being interrupted, but that is the procedure, and we are following the process, and the clerk has made it very clear that that's the correct way to proceed. So if we can carry on with the vote, Madam Clerk, I would be grateful. Thank you.
Well, let me appeal to the clerk one more time on what a dilatory motion is supposed to have a time when we return the adjourn debate till. Madam Clerk, can you please advise on what this motion has to look like to be a dilatory motion, so it's just not erasing the debate, please?
The question being asked is, was this a proper motion? And it's a yes or no question, I believe, at this point.
Yes.
Thank you. So let's carry on with the vote.
Mr. Sadoo?
Yes, I vote to adjourn.
Mr. Weiler?
I vote to adjourn.
Ms. Harder?
I vote no.
Mr. McLean?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
No.
Mr. Zimmer?
No.
Monsieur Simard?
Je vote contre l'ajournement.
Mr. Cannings?
I vote yes.
I have 6 yeas and 5 nays.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, so let's get on with the meeting. I will, at long last, introduce our witnesses. Mr. Orr and Mr. Beck, I will say thank you for coming in, and I will say thank you for indulging us while we went through a process earlier in the meeting. Very quickly, I mean, you have 5 minutes each to make your remarks. We will then open the floor to questions. After both of you have completed your remarks, you're free to speak and encouraged to speak in either official language. Translation services are available to you. And I will give the floor to perhaps Mr. Orr, if you'd like to start us off, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for today, and Mr. Chair for introduction. My name's Derek Orr. I'm have a little bit of background in forestry and economic development. Definitely grew up in Prince George and was able to eventually become the chief of McLeod Lake Indian Band, which was a major player within northeastern BC on forestry. We were able to develop a number of companies for economic development and making profits to provide us with revenues for health, education, culture, and other things. We were also fairly innovative and way before my time. So we were able to develop companies within the area of our traditional territory to promote employment and economic recovery. I was the chief of McLeod Lake Indian Band in 2008 in the downturn and worked diligently to come out of the economics and to provide jobs for our members, our community, our province, and even British Columbia. So it was a great feat and one that I had a lot of help with, and were able to develop some projects. As I seen the forestry change, and obviously the AAC is shrinking and going less product to be available to the companies, been able to see areas where we could make value-added products. We developed a cant mill where it took basically wood waste, the lumber or brush piles where we were looking for logs from 2 to 5 inches or 3 to 5 inches in diameter. We set up a cant mill in BC and was able to ship those cants overseas and develop some markets in China, and even went over to China in 2015 to develop a customer base, and we're doing well. Unfortunately, due to some factors and limited opportunities, we were pushed out a bit because that tree we were looking for kind of went up in price once there was a demand for it. So there's some issues. We also worked with the BC government to get Mackenzie Pulp Mill back in order. We were able to negotiate a forest license to cut, and provided we're able to get that back in 2010 and employment. So definitely focused on value added, and have a number of, I think, ideas in order to make it so we can start utilizing more of the forest. I think it was in 2019, the forest sector provided $23.7 billion to Canada's GDP. So no small slouch in that. And I think it's one of our major sectors. And if we can utilize it even more, I think there's great opportunity to be able to develop some other opportunities. Some of the challenges that we face were a couple of the bigger companies have the majority of the shares, so it's hard to break into that. And then forest utilization, a lot of the burning that goes on, releasing carbon monoxide into the atmosphere. If we could limit that by maybe a waste management pricing or whatever, I think could be great. Because if we're not able to do that going forward, we're all in trouble, because with if the global warming gets to a certain level, it's no good for any of us. So I think that I provided some information on what the possibilities could be
doing. And basically it's, I think, a bit of tenure reform, some law good practices reform, and just a bit of a culture shift within the industry could really help out and to utilize a lot of what we're wasting in the industry right now. It's my friend from Paper Excellence, he said we're taking all the steaks and leaving the chicken wings. So I thought that was pretty funny. We're not utilizing what we could, and I think that's a detriment, especially with the lower AAC. So, and then using it for pellets and other such things. So I won't go on much further than that, but I think a focus on waste billing, selective logging, and local ownership will all go to increasing and helping us get out of this economic challenge that we're going to have going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. I appreciate your comments and again, your patience. Okay, Mr. Beck, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and committee meeting members, for this opportunity to speak regarding aspects of Canada's forest economy. Our company, Capacity Forest Management, has been working with probably 18 to 20 First Nation bands across the province of British Columbia, helping with foundation and pathway agreements. So we're very proud to kind of working and conducting and providing forestry business and revenue sharing opportunities for First Nations within our sustainable forestry industry. Forestry is an important industry to Canada that provides sustainability, secure, and good paying jobs to 225,000 plus Canadians in the industry. And in addition, it also adds another 350,000 jobs created through forestry activities. A significant part of the forest recovery plan is the government and industry need to involve and collaborate with First Nations by providing forestry business opportunities, forest tenure, business to business or joint ventures, and activity-based government stumpage revenue sharing within First Nations within their unceded territory. The importance of involving First Nations in all aspects of forestry will provide reconciliation approaches to enhance fiber security for many forest licensees, tenure holders, and mills to access the timber. Recent historical foundation pathway agreements signed with First Nations, for example, is Seashelt Nation and Lake Babine Nation, are examples of the provincial and federal government supporting First Nations in working towards reconciliation and becoming a key economic component and participation participant in the forest industry. And some other positive aspects, like I have to say, with the government of Canada, is they recognize forestry as a key part of climate change, and as identified, forestry professionals will play a key role and a vital role in commitments to climate change and implementation of by committing 2 million trees to be planted. Sorry, 2 billion trees. Again, Government of Canada and provincial government of BC have taken some great steps to include First Nations in the forest recovery strategy through pathway and foundation agreements. These agreements have essentially placed the First Nation in the reconciliation aspect to be awarded for forest tenure volume, forest revenue sharing to build successful forestry businesses. When First Nation forestry businesses are involved, it will provide long-term fiber security, launch future First Nations forestry business partnerships, and forestry revenue sharing with government and industry. The key requirement for successful Canadian forest economic recovery will be to look at forestry business approaches and work collaboratively with First Nations, which will allow improved access to Canada's forest land base and resources within First Nations unceded territories. Without access from First Nations on the forest land base, fiber security and timber supply of mills will be impacted and will impact the forest economy recovery. If there is a lack of fiber access, security will reduce future investment, employment, manufactured forest products, and exports of forestry products or raw logs. So again, it'll be vital to work collaboratively with First Nations by providing these type of activity-based approach revenue sharing agreements, granting rights of forest tenure to secure access to fiber. This will include forms of tenure acquisition mechanisms, government granting increased timber supply apportionment to First Nations, and both industry and government forming business to business or joint venture agreements, which will comprise aspects of government stumpage revenue sharing. And creation of business partnerships with First Nations will provide assurance that industry and government will adhere to First Nations best management and sustainable land practices and policies within their unceded territories. Many key social and environmental values that First Nations want protected are cultural and spiritual features and areas, food sovereignty and water quality and access to the resources. A collaborative approach to create First Nation partnerships and relationship agreements will build trust with government and industry, implement practice First Nations sustainable land policies and practices that they provide easier access to long-term fiber security. And another issue that with the recovery that some of our First Nation businesses that we've seen as well as industry are in BC are stumpage fees currently, the fee in lieu tax on raw log exports, timber supply reductions, working forest land base, and climate change. Based on stumpage fees is a business and a tenure where is a fee that business and tenure holders pay when they harvest timber from Crown lands. Stumpage is a payment for use of public natural resources to fund vital social services and provide government an avenue for First Nation revenue sharing agreements. Stumpage will need to be adapted and respond to lumber prices quicker, not quarterly adjustments. Log prices don't respond quick to stumpage rates and spikes, and typically take 6 months to adjust and respond, and impacts the bottom line of projects and project startups. Currently, many First Nation businesses cannot start up projects due to the high stumpage rates which we're seeing today in BC. Current log market prices are not achieving profits for the First Nations, and logging costs are also increasing with carbon taxation. In addition, any First Nation tenure holders projects on hold will reduce logs to mills, which will struggle to create, which will create curtailments and create a trickle-down effect and impact communities and employment. There's a need to review pricing formulas, equations, and stumpage calculation to be more reactive to the new lumber pricing models that will lower stumpage to make logging more viable. If stumpage fees are not reduced, though, we will see another forestry sector downturn impacting hundreds of forestry workers in the logging, road contract, which will see logging, road contractors, log haulers, and possibly mills and closures having downtime.
Mr. Beck, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up if you would, please.
Okay. And another aspect is the fee in lieu is another challenge for many of their First Nation companies here that are impacted by the variable rate for lower valued whitewood, hemlock, balsam, and spruce, which is taxed typically at 10 to 35% domestic value. The higher value surrounding the whitewood, the higher the whitewood is taxed. Possibly the fee in lieu was set at 10% prior. And there are only 2 mills on the coast cutting hemlock, and the new tax structure removes the ability for tenure holders to increase net revenue by moving whitewood deemed surplus to domestic needs, as per the surplus test. Other markets, U.S. and Asia, and that often pay much higher prices. With the incentive to move surplus volume to other markets, tenure holders are concerned that the domestic market will become flooded, which will quickly drive down pricing, which will result in tenure holders, First Nations included, will either not bring any volume to market or focus on Douglas fir or cedar stands, which is high grading the timber profile. Forestry tenure holders are already seeing a negative harvest response from this implementation of the policy. And some coastal logging contractors are beginning to find themselves short of work, and this trend will continue in areas of log exports and domestic saw logs, which were balanced prior to the new policies. Currently, First Nation.
Mr. Beck, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up like almost immediately if you can.
Okay. All right. So yeah, with the fee in lieu, it's going to impact many of our First Nation projects, and I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thanks very much, and sorry for having to interrupt, but we do have to keep to some semblance of a schedule today. Mr. Zimmer, I understand you're now going first for 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And hey, Derek, it's good to see you again. I'm in Prince George as we speak. I just have to move my motion today, Mr. Chair, based on we didn't have the chance last time. Hopefully we'll get through this quickly. That the Honorable Mary Ng, Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, be invited to appear before the committee as a part of its ongoing study on economic recovery in the forestry sector no later than February 26, 2021, to provide critical information relating to the recent World Trade Organization ruling, as the government official who appeared on October 30th, 2020 was not able to respond to the questions that we had, and suggested that Global Affairs Canada appear and answer the question at a future meeting. So I think in good faith already, we've heard that the minister is supposed to be here, but I just wanted to put it on the table to ensure that that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer, and I'm happy to put on the record that we've already discussed this and we've already agreed to it, and she is coming in the 26th. So.
I believe we need to vote on it just to make sure, though, correct? Now the motion's on the table.
We've already addressed this your motion previously, and it's been passed. She is coming on the 26th.
The date had timed out though, so I just need it'd be a quick show of hands that we support this, that she's going to come from your side. So a quick vote would be great.
But Mr. Zimmer, we've already voted on this. We voted on it on Monday.
We didn't actually.
We did actually, as part of the subcommittee report.
We didn't. We didn't actually vote on the motion.
Okay, well, Madam Clerk, can you clarify that for us?
Yes, by the committee concurring in the subcommittee report that featured that motion, it has been agreed to.
So it's already been voted on and approved by this committee.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because that wasn't my understanding. So okay, we're good. We're good to go then. So thank you, Chair, for clarifying. Clerk, thank you for clarifying that. Derek, so I just wanted to get back to you. So just you referred to Mackenzie Pulp and Mackenzie Paper. My dad is, when I was 19, I remember stopping by to see him. He was a carpenter working on those hopeful projects that were part of Mackenzie and part of McLeod Lake. The timber that came from around the area, in case folks don't know, around Mackenzie's, McLeod Lake is right next door. So I just wanted to speak to, I guess, and you and I both know the answer, but I think the Canadian public doesn't necessarily know this. How important the forest sector is to the Indigenous communities across the country. I certainly know. I drive through McLeod Lake, just drove through there yesterday again, and see the activity there. Speak to how important and what it's brought to McLeod Lake as the chief, and even what you see happening now, the benefits of forestry.
So I think first of all, it's a renewable resource, and if we manage it properly, we're going to be able to see multi-generations of benefits from that. And I can't speak to enough. McLeod Lake Indian Band started out with a very small opportunity, and we actually had to protest to get it. And it wasn't because we wanted to stop the activity, it's that we wanted to be a part of it. And this was way before my time. And then we were able to develop companies that worked in the forest sector that provided income to our community, where we could develop and pay for housing, schooling, whatever. We developed a trust. There was lots of other things. I don't speak as a representative, but only as a community member. And the ability that we've had to deal with. We were the #1 employer in Mackenzie at one time, a small First Nation of 230 people, and got into the energy industry. So I can't, it was kind of a stepping stone to get into other alternative energy, mining, all kinds of other things. So forestry has been the backbone for McLeod Lake Indian Band since we can remember. So highly important, and being able to be a part of it is amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. And I wanted to speak to Mr. Beck too, and I'll bring both of you into this conversation because you, Mr. Beck, referred to the stumpage issues. And again, that's a provincial matter, but I've been puzzled why the stumpage system that we have in BC is not really taking advantage of all the beetle kill wood. And I've said this many times, and this committee is probably getting tired of me saying it, but the beetle kill that used to be the spruce beetle or the pine beetle, now it's the spruce beetle. And we don't have a way that really targets that wood and gets it down while it's still in a usable form, but it just sits there and dies and becomes unusable. There's no a better stumpage rate to pull that out unless it's completely dead. And maybe I guess, Mr. Beck, you referred to this. It's making it where BC is uncompetitive in our forest sector. And we'll start with Mr. Beck, go to Mr. Can you just speak to that, the competitiveness and how important it is to have a competitive forestry, and what are some things that we need to do to keep it that way in BC?
Yeah, the competitive aspect is the stumpage right now currently. It changed to the lumber-based pricing system, and we're seeing astronomical lumber pricing, which is now creating a high stumpage rate for BC, and it's making it very uncompetitive to try and get that those logs to the lumber mills as well as to market. And the approach the NDP here in the province of BC is creating some difficulties, with the lower valued dead standing pine trees, as well as some of the currently infected spruce bark beetle trees, making it less competitive to try and get that volume out of the forest land base.
Mm-hmm. Derek.
Well, I know stumpage has definitely been an issue, and with the deterioration of both the pine beetle and the spruce beetle, we've, as a community, I've done a lot of logging to try and get that to market before it deteriorated. We had a longer lifespan with the pine beetle, but the spruce bark beetle has a way shorter lifespan, so we got as much as we could. And that's one of the problems that I think we face going forward, is that we have these stands of timber that are still standing, but they're unproductive. There's no way to log them because the economics aren't available, and they just stand, so they don't get replanted and in production. So it's a big issue going around. I think,
not to mention the forest fires that are going to be more prevalent, I would imagine, because of them there.
Thanks,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer. I'm going to have to stop you there. Okay, Mr. Lefebvre, over to you for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witness for being here. And thank you for certainly for your testimony. This is great. We've heard it from a number of witnesses about the importance of certainly of the forest sector. I'm from Kapuskasing, Spruce Falls. My dad worked there, my grandfather, so I'm in Sudbury, which is a mining town. I understand the importance of forestry and for Indigenous communities as well. I wonder maybe if Mr. Beck and Mr. Orr wanted to elaborate on the Indigenous Forestry Initiative. Mr. Beck, you said that there's a lot of good programs from the federal government, and I'm assuming that's one of them that you wanted to talk about. And I know that you obviously deal with Indigenous communities, so maybe if you can share with us some successes from that program, and maybe and certainly ways of maybe improving the program. And then once you're completed, I'd like to hear Mr. Orr on that as well. Mr. Beck.
Thank you. Some of the recent very positive aspects working with the province as well as federal government has been the foundation pathway agreements that have been in place, i.e. which we've worked with Seashell Indian Band on the Sunshine Coast was one, as well as Lake Babine Nation up in the Burns Lake Smithers area. I've been very successful in attaining aspects of tenure from the licensees, working with government, working with the licensees to garner tenure for the First Nations to actually utilize and actually sell that volume and to create economic opportunities and training for their memberships. And as well to the aspects of working with government, having some type of revenue sharing type of agreements within these tenures, where the stumpage is shared, 75% of that stumpage revenue is actually returned back to the nation, where they can put it into some type of other business sectors or business opportunities that will create more jobs and more training opportunities for these First Nation bands.
Thank you. Mr. Orr?
Yes, so I think access to fiber is one of the biggest things that could make an impact. I think that with some of the opportunities that we had in Mackenzie with starting up Does Cho Forest Products, we were able to employ a number of our members as well as non-members within the community. We also had synergies with the pulp mill where we gave them our chips, and we're able to really utilize those and to make sure that we're part of the economy and push it forward. However, with not being able to get access to the log we needed or a higher cost, we weren't able to. So I think access to fiber in a way that works good for everyone is the key, and that can come in many forms, right? So we have our own amount of timber, but being able to have local ownership of fiber is imperative. Is key.
I agree. And Mr. Beck, you touched upon training initiatives. And maybe I'd like to kind of you to extrapolate on that, the importance of that, and is there enough support for that? Because one of the things that we've heard many times is the capacity building in these communities, right? And I've seen it firsthand. I was in the community in Quebec, of northern Quebec, called Waswanipi, and they had 20 some years ago they had a lumber mill, and then it didn't materialize. But then everybody had some training, so they all left to actually to continue other business elsewhere, and then we provided them with funding to restart the mill probably 3 years ago. They all came back because they had all created this capacity elsewhere. So I'm just curious as to what you think and how the federal government can support more additional training opportunities.
Absolutely. The government, the provincial and federal government would be able to help fund some of the training opportunities. Through the foundation agreement was an example. We ended up training several First Nation band members on logging equipment that now have full-time jobs, but it is also working with licensee holders as well as logging contractors to try and find that seat time for them. But it comes down to funding because it is an extra cost. Training does cost money because they got to get up to the appropriate timing and speed of some of these logging contractors need to make money.
Mr. Orr, on the training for your community?
We were able to develop a training program with the District of Mackenzie. We were allocated a joint forest license. So we used those funds to help fund some of the training and push through I think it was close to 10 individuals from the local community into the operation jobs training, and that provided them skills to go elsewhere too. So I think some of them were able to go into our logging companies as well as our milling facilities and then elsewhere. So I think training is key.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. And maybe to Mr. Orr, you talked about value-added products. Certainly, that's something. So any suggestion from a federal government perspective when we going to be concluding this study as to what we can support or what more measures that we could put in place to support you and your value-added products that you want to create and invest?
Well, I think there's, from what I've seen with a couple individuals, local companies, they're moving to more selective logging forest practices, being able to take all the what they call guts and feathers, everything else other than the saw log, and being able to utilize that. I think it's throwing away or burning and putting CO2 in the atmosphere just isn't what we can do. There's a theory of thought that we're able to, if we do it right, manage the forest, because what I've been told is that the forest grows in an S curve, and the forest gets to a peak storage capacity and then falls off because some of the trees start to deteriorate. So when we start to selective log, we can get that deteriorated fiber off the ground and continue to have that forest continue to produce at that level instead of it dropping off. So really managing the forest better is one of the solutions, I believe.
Thanks,
you very much.
Mr. Orr. Thanks, Mr. Lefebvre. Okay, Mr. Simard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beck, Mr. Orr, first of all, I'm sorry for the little time loss at the start. That's the parliamentary game. I appreciated something in your presentation, Mr. Orr. You said there must be a cultural change within the industry. I think this is the object of consensus amongst several witnesses we heard. For too long, I think we are satisfied with commodities, the 2x4. I think the federal government, should develop programs that would allow the implementation of value-added products. And I think that's what you pointed out, Mr. Orr. So along those lines, I would like to know, have you used federal programs that can assist you, Mr. Orr, in going in that direction towards value-added products? So right now you are not getting the English translation? Did Mr. Beck follow the English translation?
French.
Derek, there's a small icon at the lower in the middle, and you can just click on interpretation and just pick English.
I have done that.
Okay.
Maintenant, est-ce que vous avez l'interprétation quand je parle?
I have interpretation. Can you hear the translator when...
You have it on off.
I have it on English.
Okay. Did you hear any of Mr. Smart's question?
I did, but I don't understand French.
Okay, Mr. Smart, do you want to try it again? See if the translation works.
Maintenant, si je parle maintenant, est-ce que...
So, as I'm speaking now, can you hear the translator's voice in English? So I was saying, in your introduction, you spoke about a cultural change within the forestry industry. So I know that cultural change goes through value-added products. We must stop being happy with this famous 2x4 commodity product. So along those lines, I was wondering, have you used federal government programs that can assist you in moving towards this value-added products?
Yes, we have used government funding prior. I haven't been involved with McLeod Lake since 2017, but we had grant writers that would help us to utilize whatever monies we could. A lot of the times it was more efficient and effective just to use our own monies. For instance, the cant mill that we built was 95% McLeod Lake and Indian Band own source funding. So I think not having our own source funding would have made it very difficult to get to where we needed to be. So yes, we do think that there's funding out there, but it's usually a portion of what's needed. So having your own is essential.
Oui. Donc,
So thank you, Mr. O. And maybe for Mr. O and Mr. Beck, your answer shows what is really a problem for me. There is no true strategy on the part of the federal government to support these value-added products within the forestry sector. And that's important. Just for the famous iFit program, which is investment in processing forestry products, you're talking about 82 million over a 3-year period. That's really not much when you understand that new technologies in the forestry sector can be quite expensive. So do you think it would be a good idea for the federal government to really come up with a federal strategy towards the second and third level of processing in the forest industry? To start with Mr. Beck.
Feel that more funding from the federal government to help try and establish some of these biofuel type avenues to help with climate change. It will definitely help. I mean, the strategies out there, as Mr. Orr has noted, the funding is minuscule for what you actually need to put in place to look at some of these other aspects of products for forestry, as well as biofuels that are maybe needed to help with the climate change.
It's just smart. I'm going to give you some extra time because of the translation problems we had at the
Merci.
beginning.
So I think that government's definitely working towards solutions. And part of the solution is just the cultural shift, and change is inevitable in anything. As we get to some of the issues with climate change and as we go forward, that's going to automatically force change. I think there can be some things that contributed that could help to promote that. Like one of the things, people burn the brush piles because it's cheaper. So lighting that up is an economic benefit. Maybe trying to balance that, some waste billing perhaps, to make sure that, for instance, we had there was a cut just outside of McLeod Lake, or sorry, Mackenzie, heading to, probably about 15 kilometers. There's about 15 or 20 brush piles there. They were lit on fire and burnt. And I took pictures of it, and I tried to find my old presentation that I provided at one of the natural resource forums showing these brush piles on fire, because I specifically stopped to take the picture because I wanted to show there's a cogen or a bio facility 20 kilometers away, and this was being burnt, and all that CO2 was going up. And from my discussions, the people that would have taken that lost out because there was a bid 11% lower. So there's some economics there, but being able to light it on fire to save $1, I think, has to be looked at.
Voilà.
Thank you. I'm going to have to stop you there, Mr. Simard.
Oui, peut-être une...
Maybe a last question, Mr. Chair, quickly.
Translation and then some already, so I'm going to have to move on. You will get another chance, though. Mr. Cannings, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the witnesses for being here. And I'm going to I'd like to follow up on that discussion, because this burning of slash piles is a real concern to me. I see it in my riding. I'm down in the West Kootenay, South Okanagan area. Sometimes when I go into the Arrow Lakes, it looks like you're entering into the gates of hell in the fall, because it just is, there's so much fire on a cloudy day. And I just wanted to let you have some more time to explain the economics of that and this, waste management pricing, how that might affect. We've heard of the high stumpage rates, and stumpage rates are sensitive issues because that's one of the main reasons why the Americans have put these illegal tariffs on. But if you could explain maybe how, if those stumpage rates had more leeway in terms of the type of wood that's being taken out, how that would work. But how can we get companies to stop burning this waste? I know there's a First Nations group on the reservoir there at the north end of the reservoir, north of Mackenzie, who is paid $1 million a year to burn the wood waste that washes up on the beach instead of using it for biofuel. So if you could just take some time and continue on with that, explain what that waste management pricing would look like. That's to Mr. Aware.
So I don't have the silver bullet for that one. I think that there's a lot of variables that go into that, but having discussions with, and I've talked with Len Stratton. He's the BC Timber Sales manager here in Prince George, and he says that's one of the best ways where we can start to solve some of these challenges, is being able to have the discussions about what'll work, and a number of parties coming to the table and being able to find the solutions as we go forward. As I said, I haven't been as much into the forestry sector, so to speak, but still have knowledge that there can be solutions. But having sort of the stick and the carrot we talked about, in pricing, and whatever that looks like is a bit difficult for me to discuss at the moment, but there has to be some maybe penalty as well as a benefit for them to utilize that. And as I said, there's a number of other factors, facilities, but we have a number of them in Prince George, and it just doesn't make sense if you don't have enough food that you're throwing out half the plate or a quarter of the plate. So it's just finding those solutions by talking with each other is the way to go, I think.
Right. Well, thanks. And going to Mr. Beck again about the stumpage issues, and if they're based on lumber prices. Lumber price today is over $900. It's crazy. It's like 3 times what it normally is. But I think it was you that mentioned a program that returns 75% of those stumpage fees to a First Nation if they're part of some program. I just wonder if you could expand on that, and whether, if that was the case, those groups would appreciate high stumpage rate.
Absolutely. Where the high stumpage rates, the 75% stumpage return is through a forest tenure opportunity agreement that was provided through the province of British Columbia under the foundation agreement that was rewarded to the First Nation clients. And yeah, it's great to see the stumpage revenues, but that stumpage revenue is based on logging activity by the First Nation band. So the problem is you're kind of in a headway here with high stumpage. The forestry companies aren't logging right now because it's too high of a cost. They're not going to get any net returns or revenue. But in the other aspect you got to look at is, well, high stumpage, they're going to see a higher return to the nation itself, but your forestry company is going to suffer for it, their First Nation company. And I maybe be able to expand a little bit too on your question with Mr. Orr. There is pricing for the kind of the biofuels. It's 25 cents usually a cubic meter. However, it comes down to cost of what they pay for that fiber. You got to include your logging and your hauling and all your engineering and silviculture aspects and costs into that. And usually, typically, those mills or biofuels aren't paying enough to get that wood out of the forest land base.
Okay, just maybe quickly explain to me again. If lumber prices are so high, and I hear, if you're making 2x4s, you're doing good business today. Am I wrong, or is it just too high so that we can't do other things like get at this lower grade wood?
The First Nation licensee holders and tenure holders, they're basically market loggers. They don't have a mill or anything like that, whereas licensees, they can pay that higher stumpage and they'll see profits on the end turn when they throw that lumber out into the open market at $900 to $1,000 a thousand. And so when it comes down to First Nations or market loggers, they don't see that return. They're seeing kind of a portion at the front end, and so they're losing out on that aspect of things with the higher stumpage rates. We've gone from $30 a cubic meter to now $80 to $85 a cubic meter here in this first quarter of 2021.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mr. Cannings. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Cannings. Okay, that completes the first hour of the first round. We're not going to have time for all of the second round, so I'm proposing we do. The next is Mr. Patzer, then Mr. Weiler, then Mr. Simard, and then Mr. Cannings, and we'll stop there. That way, because we do have some, we need some time today for the other business, but I would like to try to make up a little time with the witnesses for our earlier interventions. So on that basis, Mr. Patzer, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll start with you, Mr. Beck. Your company does work, yeah, I guess with tree planting in some regards. So do you have any advice or observations for the government's plan to plant 2 billion trees?
Well, right now, 2 billion trees is going to be quite difficult when you've got other licensee holders, only a certain amount of greenhouses to sow those seedlings to produce, whereas we're looking at right now, Canada usually plants about 600 million trees a year across Canada. BC alone, 250 million. So, I mean, the infrastructure there to plant those 2 billion trees within 10 years is going to be quite difficult. and it's going to be quite challenging to achieve that.
Okay. Kind of going back to the issue of around stumpage and just different barriers that a First Nation be facing if they're looking to get involved in the forestry sector. There's just, and then I mean, we've got the lack of a softwood lumber deal. There seems to be a lot of different barriers facing people. So with how far it's getting to be to transport to a mill, like how big of a hurdle are these things becoming for somebody who's looking to enter into the forestry sector?
Well, the biggest hurdle right now, again, I mean, Mr. Orr and myself have already noted, is acquiring forest tenure for First Nations. It is one of the toughest things that the government needs to apportion during these timber supply reviews. They need to apportion more volume to First Nations to allow them to get into the forestry market and forestry economics aspect of things. And again, too, the hauling aspect, we're getting pushed further and further out, or we're getting pushed into more sensitive visual landscape units where it's more difficult to, have some of these more larger or these cuts that are over 40 hectares, trying to achieve the forest health aspect of things by mitigating beetle or wildfire, trying to, acquire the dead timber before it becomes dead useless, are some of the major challenges. But hauling distances are becoming a factor with fuel costs, carbon taxation. It's starting to really impact a lot of the operations.
Yeah. Just another quick question here too, in regards to investment. Is there any issues with foreign investment or with competing with foreign interests, or is there any interference being run in Canadian forestry by foreign interests that would prevent somebody, again, from trying to start up in the forestry sector? Or if somebody wanted to start a new mill somewhere, is there any issues with foreign interests?
Not that I'm really aware of. I don't know if Mr. Orr would have any comment on that.
I think that just from previous dealing with foreign interest, they don't always have the same ideology as the community, and that has posed a bit of a challenge. We have been able to develop some of the relationships with when we were operating Descho Forest Products, and develop that relationship so that we could ship that fiber over to China. And so there is opportunity, but it usually takes a long time to develop. And if it's not maintained, it's hard to get it going again.
Yeah. I guess for both of you quickly, the clean fuel standard is adding another barrier as well. Have you guys done any cost analysis on what the clean fuel standard is going to apply to transportation costs, especially as our mills are getting pushed further and further away with closures?
No, we haven't done any analysis yet, but it is kind of on the horizon to start looking at it as part of the performa and net profit and revenue share for the First Nation forestry businesses that we work with.
Where am I at for time, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay. You know what? I think I'll just cede my time. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Passer. Mr. Weiler, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank both the witnesses for joining our committee today and for their patience earlier on. My first question is to Mr. Becht, and you mentioned some of the First Nations that you've been working with, and one of them is in my riding with the Sechelt Nation, where they have a foundation agreement with the province. You mentioned another one in Lake Babine, I think. And given that BC there's very few treaties, it's likely that there may be more and more of these types of foundation agreements. As the province is looking towards reconciliation. With this in mind, given this is a provincial and First Nation agreement, what advice would you have for the federal government here on ensuring that the federal government can help maximize some of the opportunities for First Nations in the forestry sector as some of these agreements are being put together?
Yeah, you're right. It's the Seashelt and Lake Babine Nation were the two ones that we work on, and we're working on further ones that are reconciliation process with the provincial government, but also we're looking for the federal government to provide some grant funding or money to maybe purchase more forest tenure. Also provide, possibly forestry infrastructure, as well as creating some avenues or training dollars for some of these First Nation communities that are maybe interested in becoming a forester or looking into becoming a forestry skidder operator or loaderman or even into the trucking industry. Is some of the aspects of these foundation agreements will be very important for First Nations and federal government to provide some grant funding.
Thank you. To follow on my colleague, Mr. Patzer's question earlier, we have made a pretty ambitious plan to plant 2 billion trees across the province. And I know this is something that your company is involved in providing services, working with First Nations in this. And I'm wondering if you could provide some advice on the best way for the federal government to partner with Indigenous peoples to ensure this commitment's realized.
The best way to probably ensure that you're involving First Nations and the First Nation communities is to probably look at contacting some of the natural resource departments within some of these communities to put the advertising out that they're looking for tree planters, or looking at the forestry management companies that are working with these First Nation businesses or First Nation communities to try and get the word out for employment and aspects of why we're doing the tree planting.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Beck. And I'd like to ask actually the same question to Mr. Orr as well. How best could the federal government partner with Indigenous peoples on this 2 billion planting of 2 billion trees plan?
Well, I think it has to go with the communication piece that Mr. Beck's talked about, reaching the community and providing them with the opportunity. I know that for my previous dealings with McLeod Lake, we planted 1.6 million trees annually just on our own forested land. So have some ability to be of assistance in that. And I think a lot of the other communities probably have or may not have opportunities to be a part of that and would be very interested, I would assume.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And this is something that's come up in just about every committee meeting we've had on the study is the challenge with the burning of flash piles. And Mr. Orr, you brought that up in your testimony earlier on. And one of the programs that we have run through NRCan from the federal government is the Investing in Forestry Industry Transformation Program. And as part of this, it's aiming to create a more competitive and resilient forest sector with a focus on low carbon projects that result in new and diversified revenue streams. So there are so many successful projects out there that use forest residues and wood byproducts to commercialize some new innovative products. And I'm wondering if you've had any experience working with this program before that you could share with the committee.
No, I haven't, and quite not informed about it at the moment, but I haven't had any experience with that. But I do know that during our time being able to access funds for plant development, increased production is always was a goal of ours to try and find the money to help promote our path forward. And as I said, it was usually a small portion, and lots of times there are strings attached, so it can be quite complicated, but we did the best we could at the time.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Orr. Thanks, Mr. Weiler. That's all the time. Okay, so we have two members left, Mr. Simard and Mr. Canning. You'll each get 2.5 minutes, starting with Mr. Simard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, quickly, earlier when we left with Mr. Orr, we were discussing these value-added products. and also programs that may or may not be available at the federal government level. The famous iFit program. There is a measure that could be quite interesting in terms of developing these value-added products. It's the idea of the carbon footprint. If the federal government gave the example in these supply contracts, taking into account the carbon footprint, maybe we would give a second wind or some breathing room to this whole series of bioproducts, biogas, bioplastics, and so on. So I don't know if this measure would be interesting for you, Mr. Orr.
I think that it's come down to economics has been a major piece for being able to make it proficient, right? The ability for bioplants to pay for, but I think, as you said, having some of the major licensees having to use that or provide that for the proponents would be a benefit, because, as I said, the waste of the additional fiber supply just doesn't make sense anymore. I think that we have to find a way to make it more utilize all of it, because we just have to change. And I think there's some models in other countries that have replicated that, as I provided in a PowerPoint presentation that I provided, and do know some other individuals that are working towards making selective logging and making it more efficient as well as profitable. So it is an option.
Thank you, Mr. Simard. It's right on time. Mr. Cannings, last, certainly not least, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. And I'd just like to finish at maybe a higher elevation. We've been talking a lot in the last Parliament and in this one in Ottawa about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That legislation tried to move through previously. It was blocked in the Senate. But British Columbia has passed the DRIPA law, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People Act. And I'm just wondering if Mr. Beck, you might want to comment on what your feelings has, how that might really affect Indigenous forestry over the long term.
Yeah, with the recent legislation on DRIP through the British Columbia Provincial Parliament there, it has actually created a better avenue for First Nations to garner forest tenure. It's allowing us at the table with government provincially to voice the concerns of First Nations based on the Constitution Act, Section 35, and the Royal Proclamation. Is allowing them to have more rights to their unceded territory and establishing more forest businesses and more management of their land base.
And Mr. Orr, do you want to comment as well?
Sure. I think it's imperative that when the local communities own the tenure, they spend it within their region usually, whereas some of the bigger licensees have a lot of fiber but are going overseas and investing and not necessarily having that money recycle in our economy. I know that McLeod Lake Indian Band spends a significant amount of money to buy harvesting equipment, to purchase local lots of areas, right? So they're giving back to the economy. And I think that's where the real benefit comes from, local Indigenous being able to have their own tenure within their areas. It's a significant benefit. And then when they partner with others to maybe they sell that or they develop a facility that can provide opportunities, it's a win-win for everyone. So,
well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Cannings, right on time. Okay, that is all the time we have today for our witnesses. I'd like to thank Mr. Beck and Mr. Orr for coming today and providing valuable information. You are our last two witnesses, in fact, on this study, so we're very grateful to you. Again, thank you for your patience at the beginning of the meeting. You got to see some of the inner workings of Parliament and how the process works. Perhaps another day you can share with us your takeaway on that, but I just want to say thank you for listening to that and being here today. So with that note, I will suspend the meeting and everybody can sign back on and we can continue committee business. So thank you very much,
everyone.
gentlemen.
Yep, thank you.